do you want to be the head clerk of your own organization? And that question is something which really, I think, kind of stuck in my head, that I definitely don't want to become the head clerk of my own organization, because the reason why I chose to do business is I could earn enough money, I could find some time for myself and not be answerable to others. With this in my mind, I had a vision that, and I believe strongly that work has to be very, very diligently allocated. And if that is delegated in the right amount, you'll always be free. And that's what is very important lesson to learn as an entrepreneur, to keep yourself free.
We are three friends who met in college and now are working in diverse fields across the globe. Curious to know about what our friends are up to. So here we are, connecting, talking, and learning from our friends. In this podcast, we are sharing extraordinary insights from our not so ordinary friends, working in various industries and sharing their stories and their journey so far. These are your hosts, Hiloni Punatar,
Atit Kothari,
and Tapan Desai.
And this is What the Hat. Subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss on any episodes. Today we have with us Jainam Shah. Welcome to What the Hat.
Hello everyone.
What's up, Janam? It's been a while. I don't remember when I spoke to you last.
Yeah, it's been quite some time, I think.
From the first time, like, I know Jainam, that's been definitely DJ. The most closest interaction that I've had with Jainam was during Pulse, and that is one time when, like, probably we got closer. And one thing that I saw in you was the leadership quality that you brought on board, and the way you managed the entire team, and you got everybody together, and like to working towards the same goal of making Pulse like amazing, and how humbly you did the whole thing. That was like really a good feeling for me to know you.
Festival was something which was close to everyone.
See, this is Jainam being modest again. So Jainam, like, you were like co-captain when you were in your first year as well, right? Like for
yeah.
So you always were a leader kind of a person. And like, tell us more about your DJ days and like how did you take on these roles and like what made you interested in like being the chairperson for Pulse as well.
See, college life, to be honest, it was one of the best time. It's difficult to even describe those days because I have a lot of memories attached to them. Like talking about Pulse, I got attracted towards the festival because, a group of people, like not a group of people, I think many people working together for a common goal. That itself was something which was interesting for me, because I think that was the best way to learn managerial skills back in those days as a student. We couldn't go out or work anywhere, and especially we were from technical engineering fields. So getting hands-on experience on managerial skills was something I was looking forward to, and Pulse provided the best platform.
Yeah, that makes sense. And like during our days, I don't think so a lot of people were doing internships as well. So like whatever extracurricular skills we got were most of them were from festivals, right?
That's true. And very importantly, you learn a lot of people skills, because people come from different sections of the college. Like someone's from chemical, someone's from mechanical, and different fields, different years of engineering also, like first year students, second year students, like getting everyone on board to do something. And this is something which, there's no real incentive for somebody to do it because you're not getting paid for it, but yet like everyone wants to make something successful. So that was a life-changing experience, I think.
Yeah. And like, were there any lessons that you learned during Pulse that like they are still helping you with what job you're doing right now?
I think for this, like Hiloni would also agree that whatever we learned in Pulse, be it like finance or managing people skills or marketing, sales or whatever, I've carried all those ideas, thoughts, everything till date in my business. So definitely there was a lot of learning there, and I think if given an opportunity, everybody should take part in some sort of festival.
Completely agree. I think we have learned the core towards all these operations back then. Now we're just doing it in a little scaled up version probably, or in a lot more professional version, but the core of it remains the same.
And I remember Janam also got hands on like on the creator side. I remember him sitting with us, me and Sagar Soni, for like most of the logo design and marketing brochures and things like that.
See, with me, the whole work mantra is that it doesn't matter. I don't see the time. I mean, I see the job getting done. And I mean, if it gets done early, I don't mind leaving early also. But if it doesn't get early, then I don't mind staying back also. So in today's world, I think we have to work not seeing at the clock, but seeing at how much we've achieved in terms of the task we've completed. So that's why like used to find me late in college.
Yeah.
But like, does this change as an entrepreneur versus like what it used to be in college? Like before, we used to have like probably defined roles for a day, versus now when you come into the real world or as an entrepreneur, there are like so many things which are like ongoing that, at least for me, this has been the thing where my to-dos have never got over for the day. And there are always like some carry forwards and things that are spilling for the next day.
No, so this is what was a very important lesson I learned very early in my business. I attended a session by a corporate trainer known as his name is Jagdish Joshi, and he asked a very important question: do you want to be the head clerk of your own organization? And that question is something which really, I think, kind of stuck in my head, that I definitely don't want to become the head clerk of my own organization, because the reason why I chose to do business is I could earn enough money, I could find some time for myself and not be answerable to others. So with this in my mind, I had a vision that, and I believe strongly that work has to be very, very diligently allocated. And if that is delegated in the right amount, you'll always be free. And that's what is very important lesson to learn as an entrepreneur, to keep yourself free.
That is very well put. Yeah. So talking about your company, what do you guys do?
Yeah, like my company's name is Western Rubbers. We are into manufacturing of rubber components. So these rubber components are used for sealing solutions in different industries, from engineering to aerospace. To put it in a nutshell, like from your small simple rubber ring in your tiffin box, to your cookers, to more complicated rubber sealings in your airplanes, like sealing a full pressurized cabin, everything is basically some sort of rubber solution, and we provide them.
Okay, that's interesting. And like, what are the various lines of services in Common Timber? Like, what are different streams, like where you produce your products? And like, I think we discussed,
Correct.
like you have pharmacy as well. So like, what are other industries where you are helping produce products?
So in pharmaceutical, like when you have to manufacture vaccines and serums and other active pharmaceutical ingredients, they have to be transferred from one spot to the other spot, or filling lines, and also we make all those kinds of tubing and hoses which are actively used in all pharmaceuticals. Then coming to aerospace, we manufacture something called as an inflatable seal. We've done projects with ISRO. So they use that in transportation of satellites from across continents. So they have to keep the container sealed when it is on sea, on board. So we manufacture those kind of seals. So what we do is a very B2B product line, very custom tailor-made products, and like serving very niche sector. So yeah, my products are not something that you'll see in front of your eyes every day, but they are always there behind in the mechanism of everything that you see around you.
Okay, that's very interesting. So like, when was your, like, I think your company is well established. So when was your company founded? How long has it been there?
So this company started in around I think some 1970s. It was established by my grandfather, and I happened to join the company in 2014, right after my engineering. So I would say it's been about like 30-40 years of this company's existence.
If you were always sure, like, then why did you choose engineering? because like majority of my friends who have joined a family business, they have selected finance or something like that. So like engineering being a choice was very interesting. So can you like elaborate on that?
Yeah, I like being fair. I wasn't always sure. I mean, there was a point in my life where I wanted to be a cricketer. Some point I wanted to be some sort of a scientist. And finally, I mean, when I joined like just before engineering, I had some clarity on joining my own business. So the reason why I chose engineering is because my field one is related to a lot of engineering product, and this is my father always says that, I mean, if you're an engineer, you can get hold of the finance, but not the other way around, because my dad was from a financial field. So paying heed to what his advice was, I chose engineering. And more importantly, since my school days, I've always loved. I've had a very deep connection with science. I mean, I've always loved to know how the things work. So it wasn't a very complicated choice for me, actually.
But like, did you ever think of doing like an MBA or like pursue some kind of master's degree before you got into family business, or was it always your thought to get straight out of engineering and go to the business?
No, so that was fixed in my head. I mean, I've never given GRE or any kind of those exams to pursue anything further, because I was sure that I wanted to, after engineering, I really wanted to get down to work, like in the company, because I believe that education needs to have a stop kind of a button, but gaining knowledge like should continue even after your college days. So when we finish graduation, we are already into our prime years. That is the age what I call from 20 to 35, where we have maximum potential strength and risk-taking appetite. So I don't want to waste any more time in this prime years spending more and more amount of time in books. I rather wanted to learn from experience. And I mean, as the old adage goes, that experience is the best teacher. So I thought that why not just now start actually working and applying that knowledge.
Definitely. And then also like for like me as well, like I did my master's, but even though I did my master's, like my job was nowhere related to what I studied. So when I joined my job, like I was starting again. And that's a very good point that Jainam you made, that no matter what you study, like at the end of the day, the practical knowledge only, like it helps you get through your professional life. So moving from that, like, so when you joined your family business, like what were some major changes that you brought, and like, were there some things that you saw like after doing your engineering degree that you realized that this definitely needs to be changed?
Yeah, so as soon as I joined my company, I mean, I saw that as most family businesses in India do, like they were still working with systems which were quite old. Like, I mean, I would see my employees still working on Excel and, you know, passing information on paper, and, you know, still those conventional way of working. And like coming from this generation, I felt that this had to change. So I introduced some systems, some software like ERPs and CRMs and stuff like that, so that you know, everything, basically taking everything digital. Like, I mean, at times I would struggle to get the right kind of data, the right kind of reports from the team, and suddenly I got everything into one single dashboard. So that was one significant change I immediately got in when I joined my company.
Interesting. Any particular software that you guys use?
Yeah, so for CRM, we prefer something. The name of the software is called Pipedrive. And for ERP, I switched two ERPs actually. First, I got a custom ERP made, but there were some challenges of scaling up.
Right.
Then I went back to a very, very robust and stable ERP, which not a lot of people actually appreciate in India. It's called Tally.
Right.
And I got that Tally modified according to my working and my system.
Right. So the modification did with the Tally folks or some other developer?
So there are Tally business partners in India,
Okay.
and I mean they can do most of the modifications for you.
Got it.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And Janam, like
Wow.
when you were implementing this, like did you see any setbacks or people not accommodating your requests? Like because this is what I saw in PwC as well. If they transition to a new technology, most of the people never used it because they were so set in their old ways. So like, did you see that happen in your?
100%
Oh,
there
yeah.
was resistance, because it's like suddenly a new guy enters the company and he's trying to change systems which have been there since years. And that was one big challenge, that how to convince your employees to uh, trust you and try something new. But slowly and steadily, like, so the trick to this is you don't start directly imposing everything on them simultaneously. I started bit by bit and trying to explain them how their life is going to be easy after the software is, you know, fully functional in the company. And when they could see that this software is actually going to make their life easier, and then everybody was eventually on board. And uh, like honestly, today if I see how that has made life easier, like a simple example would be a simple task like creating an invoice, tracking the invoice to products, and passing on the work orders in the company would take like few days for them to do the entire process. Today it can happen within like half an hour. So they can see this whole change in the company, and that has actually helped me in pushing new technologies.
So like that is one of the biggest challenge that like my mama is also facing. Like he's also trying to push like new technology. He has been using Tally since forever,
Okay.
but he wants to improve. He's gone the route of designing the custom solution for his company. But like you said, it's very difficult to scale there. One roadblock that he faces is training new employees or the existing employees. So did you hold like workshops to teach them how to use the new software, or how did you train them?
See, whenever you introduce any new technology, especially which is of this nature, wherein it's going to change the entire face of your operations, one thing is sure, that your management has to be invested in that completely. Like there's not a single day that has gone by that I haven't given time in the day to just resolve and work on Tally. Like I have spent hours and hours of my time training people, hours and hours of time solving their doubts, and lot of times even doing things on my own. Like I mean, like when people get stuck, I have done a lot of research on my own. But uh, when this entire system works, and that does happen eventually, the beauty is to see everything running in sync in one software on one dashboard. Like I can know what is the profit of my company, what is the sales of my company, what's my order book, what's my inventory status, what is my future forecast of business, everything under one dashboard and within seconds, every day, 24/7. So I mean, I can't emphasize enough of the importance of having a good ERP. And for that, I have also explored like the famous ERPs like SAP B1 and the Microsoft one. But for MSME industries in India, that's still a distant dream because their cost is quite high, and comparatively, Tally does 90% of the job.
Yeah, I believe that this challenge is something that most small businesses in India have been facing. And obviously, when the second generation comes in, like for me also initially when I joined my dad's business, the major challenge was to make the people who are I mean, who have been with the company for like 30, 40 years to understand why this is a necessary adoption. And I felt particularly a couple of challenges with people even adopting the language English and understanding the technicalities of using a computer.
So I think like in terms of technology itself in India, there needs to be some push forward. And Jainam is on the forefront right now, I guess.
Yeah, actually, what you're saying, Tapan, is I think one of the major problem is technology is there. and even the owner has given the technology to the person, but how to run the technology is not being taught to them. Like example, in a simple medical shop, they are not taught how to create SKUs. That's the basic of inventory bookkeeping. So when you don't train your staff, or there's no nomenclature system of your medicines or stock that you have, there is no way that they are going to have a proper inventory database. So the trick in the book is like in the detailing of how you teach them to run the software.
Yep, makes sense. Okay. And then like when you implemented your own ERP and CRM system, like did you have to make major changes to your processes and how people were actually using that software? And how did you go about that?
No, so we didn't have to make major changes because the software was reflecting what they were already doing. It was just that they had to do it digitally. So process-wise, not major change, but major change was them adopting the system. I think that was the biggest challenge.
One thing that you also would have been, I mean, the major part of your convincing would have first been towards like probably your dad, for him to get on board and like trust you enough with bringing all these changes into the company. And like, how was that discussion like, and how well did he take all your suggestions and scope of improvement towards the business in the initial years of your joining?
See, initially, obviously, when you join any company, like just not your own family, if you join some other company, like the people around you are generally, you can't say hostile, but it takes time for people to adjust to changes. And that happens even in a family-run business. Like you come with a different thought process, your generation before you was coming with a different thought process. So friction is bound to happen, but one good policy which is set in my company is that everyone handles their department independently, and we take major decisions through consensus, but we trust one another to take the right decision in their own department. So that's one of the reasons why my dad didn't resist. In fact, he was like, if you're pushing for it, he ended up supporting me on this decision, and that has kind of helped me bring about these changes.
Yeah, it ties back to our conversation about delegation also. Like if you delegate responsibilities enough to all the department heads, they are the expert about what decision is the right for their department. So I was just going through your LinkedIn. I came across post about you're conducting like a research study on effects of various pharmaceutical cleaning agents on different rubber types. What is that about?
Oh yeah, so we manufacture, as I had mentioned, that we manufacture rubber tubing, and to be specific, it's silicone rubber. And often these tubes are used to manufacture different kinds of pharmaceutical drugs. So when they have to reuse their tube to manufacture some other drug, they have to clean and wash that tube with a lot of industrial solvents, alcohol. They have to steam clean it, UV sterilize it. So that time what happens, a lot of materials wither, and they don't they kind of leach things into your medicine. So if that happens, then US FDA and if US FDA inspects that, and if they find that there's some sort of discrepancy, they might even ask the company to shut their plant. So it's very, very critical for them to maintain the right material. So, and nobody has done intensive research on this topic. So that's why I was trying to find some people that are interested and maybe wanted to do a joint study. So that was the post about.
Interesting. Any leads there?
Yeah, I mean, I was surprised that a couple of people were interested, and the study is going great because I've listed all the chemicals that people use against all the elastomers available currently in the world, like everything that's available, and we are cross-referencing that and creating a grading system in which we rate the material from 1 to 5. So 5 being excellent and 1 being very poor in compatibility with that chemical.
Do you use LinkedIn often, like in your field, like you see a lot of people using LinkedIn?
I think LinkedIn is going to be the next best tool for marketing because one, that you have the right kind of audience. I mean, I personally not been using LinkedIn so much, but since last 1 year, I have been more and more motivated to use LinkedIn. That motivation also came when I read this book by Gary Vaynerchuk. It's the name of the book is
Gary
called
Vee.
Crushing It.
Gary Vee.
Actually, I used to not be a fan of social media, but my entire perspective had changed when I read that book. And I really believe in the power of LinkedIn.
Yeah, Gary Vee has a way of talking about things. Like whenever, like even after 6 minutes or 7 minutes of his video, like I'm super motivated to like do whatever he's telling. So it's like I think he has a way of communicating, which is very interesting.
His energy is just phenomenal. It gets you up and running, and it makes you take those actions now. Like that's what I feel from reading and listening to him all the time.
Yeah, definitely.
What better time to have LinkedIn? Because right now, due to coronavirus, this contagion that's spreading, anyways, like you, there's no way that you can meet your end customer, or there's no way that you can reach the right person in any organization. So the best way to reach the right kind of contact is through LinkedIn right now, and that's why I really vouch that LinkedIn is going to grow a lot in the coming years.
Jenna, back to your family business. Like, so when you joined, what were the things that like you had heard? What were the myths that people had told you about like joining a family business, and then you kind of debunked them, realizing like that's not true, and then you found your own way to do it. Like, can you give us some examples?
See, one biggest myth is that a lot of people feel that if they join their own family business, that they won't be respected enough, that they need to prove themselves that they've earned this. I mean, I personally believe that just because you have a platform doesn't mean that you won't be respected. I mean, you have to go out there, and when you achieve something, you will be respected no matter what. So that is one myth that I see a lot of people have today, that we have to first prove themselves to join their own businesses. I mean, but journey is getting harder and harder every day, because now world is getting more and more competitive, and there is nothing wrong if you have a platform or a head start. So if you want to prove something, you can join your own family business, take it to the next level, and you would have achieved and gained the success and gained the respect that you wanted. This was one of the myth. Another myth is that I've heard people talking is that their creative freedom or their thought process would be suppressed. Like that, if they join their family business, they wouldn't get the same kind of freedom. Which again, I believe is not true, because see, like when I had joined my company, that was one challenge that I had taken to myself, that if I cannot convince the people that are close to me to do what I want to do, I will never be able to convince people outside about my ideas. So if you take it in the right sense, you can definitely uh, do wonders and not fall prey to these myths.
Did you see any challenges in doing that, like living with your father and then even your wife, like who is now working with you? So, like, do you see any challenges? Like, do you see arguments coming back, like from work to home, and you guys discussing the same thing at your home as well? And like, how do you navigate that?
So there are friction is bound to happen, and there are endless discussions, heated debates. All that is, I think, part of healthy work culture. Because even when we work in the same organization, you won't believe, like if it's me and my wife, we barely talk 5 minutes in the whole day, because I am managing my own department, she's managing her own department, my father manages his own department. Only for strategic discussions, we all come together for a consensus. So this is how we've made some strong policies in the company to avoid this kind of friction with this, or this kind of bitterness that could come into picture if there was a clash.
Yeah, but like, has it even like come down to your dinner table at times where y'all have ended up discussing more work and say things like those which have come back home?
Honestly, my mother gets damn pissed, because she's the only one that's not part of this whole thing, because she's a homemaker. and she kind of hates this business discussion on dinner tables. So since these initial days of me starting to work, she had made one rule that not discussing anything about business on the dinner table, and since then it has stopped.
Oh yeah, even I have those rules at the dinner table. Like we are not allowed to keep our phones with us. Like it has to be piled up on the side, and we cannot have like longer discussions about work, because then it ends up like going on forever.
Jen, I'm like, we were talking about how you entered your company and you made some changes. One other thing was your US expansion of the company. So, like, how did you navigate that as well?
Oh, that would require a full separate podcast for itself. To give you a brief, when I had joined my company, one area of growth, what I saw a lot of potential was exports. And during those days, I was trying to figure which country would be best suited for us to export. And seeing the statistics and everything, apparently US purchases maximum goods in the world. Like if one country that purchases the maximum amount of stuff from the globe, it's America. So that made my decision kind of easier to have some presence in that country. It took me about 3 years to get everything settled, build new clients, go there, visit a lot of companies there. And so once we established enough revenue, we ended up incorporating a marketing company by the name Western Polymer Group. So within 3 years, like I started building this whole US business. Revenue almost grew 500%. So I definitely feel that this strategy has helped my business a lot. In fact, this year we are also planning to get some sales rep locally over there.
Okay, and the Western Polymer, like that is based out of US. Like it was based out of US before you. Okay.
Not before I joined. It was just like last year we established this Delaware-based corporation.
Delaware. Okay.
Yeah.
Most of the major companies, there are lower taxes there, right? Like so, most of the banks and things like that are established there as well.
Yeah, precisely. So any foreign company that wants to enter US, I mean, Delaware is the place that you need to be in, because at least your headquarter needs to be, your registered company needs to be in Delaware. Then you can have branches in the US, because that will help you save a lot of tax.
Makes sense. And like, how do you even start with something as big as this, like a US expansion of your own company? Like, where did you even start with that? Like, how do you research, first of all, and then like...
See, first, very important to take a call whether you want to have or not is based on your revenue. Like, I mean, if some market or some region is getting you a lion's share of revenue, then, or if it's growing at a very, very fast pace, that's when you decide that whether it will benefit you to be there locally or whether you want to work remotely. So that was the first thing where I had to decide to enter that market. Once I had made that decision, okay, now I want to be here. Then I had support of some of domain experts. Like I knew some CPAs in the US. I had met a lot of people like CAs and all in India. Then there were some chartered accountants that had network throughout the globe. Like they help companies establish Singapore-based firms or US-based firms and all. So I got in touch with them. I tried to gain knowledge of how this whole setup will happen. And using that knowledge, I went about establishing this company.
Did you ever consider like Hong Kong as an option? Because like in terms of taxation policies in US versus Hong Kong, I've seen a lot of manufacturing businesses also look at Hong Kong as a headquarter and then set up like a sub company there in the US.
So I would say, I mean, Hong Kong is also one of the tax haven places, but I think Singapore is right now number one in that category. So my eventual plan is to have Singapore-based like the entire operations or entire everything should be owned by a company in Singapore, which should have subsidiaries across the globe, because then every income is tax free in Singapore. But the only drawback to doing all that is there's a lot of paperwork, a lot of manpower, and a lot of nitty-gritties involved. So till you don't scale up to a certain level, I think it's not advisable to have multiple, like, set up in multiple countries.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Yeah, right. And then, like, while you were expanding, like you said, like coronavirus being one of the failures. So, like, what were some other challenges that you saw when you were trying to expand out of India?
Another challenge is one that immigration is one biggest challenge that I faced, because especially when I was doing with my US business itself, because what happened is that, like, everywhere I had to go, because it was very hard to get one visa for any marketing guys from here, and that also for legitimate business purposes, because I don't know, generally these days people are hostile towards immigrants anyway. So that's one biggest challenge I think is going to be there in the next 2-3 years, that immigration is going to suffer a big setback. Beside that, like, dealing with Europe, there is language barrier, but it's decreasing day by day, because countries over there are also trying to adopt to English.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
But do you think with this coronavirus situation, people are now going to be more open to doing like a video call or getting onto a quick video call instead of like doing that whole setup meeting and meeting in person? Would that
Mhm.
change in your business as well, or your distributors, buyers?
Oh, it has already been there. In fact, my industry, uh, there have been customers and clients I haven't met in years, and we've been doing business. So I think it was already there. Now it's going to get stronger. Like, people are going to avoid meeting at all. But having said that, I do believe that to gain the right kind of trust and the right kind of business relation, meeting was a very essential component of the whole business cycle. And if that is taken away by this COVID-19, it's going to be harder to connect with people digitally.
Hmm. I think for me, generally, like I feel meeting the client in person is for the retention and the long term relationship, obviously. And I think, yes, like you said, that's one thing that people are going to be seeing as a major challenge in at least the next 1 year, where travel is going to be very, uh, like, people would not consider that. But although, also on the other hand, I think at least those cold prospects and turning them into a basic warm lead, those things now would become much easier, where it would, like, people would be open to getting onto a digital platform, discussing the technicalities, and like moving on to a stage where only at the closure probably a meeting might be something they would be looking at.
Yeah, the digital revolution is going to happen. Like, I mean, this was something which was forced upon people, and I think everyone's going to adopt in this year that uh, they're going to prefer meetings online, and it, like, the way we do business is going to completely change.
Going back to your experience, right? So, like, you've been working with your company for 4 years, 5 years, right? So, like, what were some of the biggest lessons that you have learned, like, while working with your company, and like, what is some of the biggest thing that you've seen, and like, any advice for people who would be joining their own family business?
In terms of lessons, um, like, what I have learned is time is one value, one commodity which everyone has an equal share. I mean, people have told, I mean, everyone has heard this over and over again, but I still like to emphasize, because that's one lesson which something I truly believe in. Uh, Beside that, one very important lesson to all the entrepreneurs and all my audience is that your net worth is as good as your net work. So this is some lesson which has been told to me. I can't remember who was that, but it's always been stuck in my head, and that's one lesson that I would want my audience to take away.
So can you expand on like the net worth and network part? Like, what do you exactly mean by that?
What I mean by net worth is equal. Is as good as your network. Is that if you really want to grow, earn money, grow your businesses, grow your influence sphere is what I call that. Then there is no other way to doing that by besides building your network. By network, what I mean is how well you're connected with people, how well you're in touch with all the right kind of people around you, and how well you can get your things done through people. And if this is an app that was taught extensively in BNI, so this BNI was an organization that helps entrepreneurs network. There are people from different fields and backgrounds coming together and deciding to share referrals with one another. That is the whole format of this organization. So I had a fabulous time being part of BNI.
So like, can you expand more on like what is BNI and like how does it work? Like, do you have monthly sessions? Like, how do you meet new people and like how do you even enroll there?
So there are different chapters in different parts of the city, and you can go online, you can see different chapters. You just Google BNI Mumbai or BNI any other city. I mean, they're a global organization. They have chapters in every city in the world. So all the entrepreneurs meet once a week, where they share their own contacts and referrals. The whole BNI works on the policy. The policy is known as giver's gain. So if you have the intention to give something to somebody, there are high chances that tomorrow he may just want to return back the favor. So this whole BNI works on that concept. So you should focus on giving people referrals from your contacts. It's like, let's say a person A wants to sell his product, and I have a contact of somebody who is a buyer of person A's products. I get person A connected to person B, and that's how business transacts. Then that's like me giving person A a referral. In return, someday that person A might want to return the favor to me.
Interesting. Do you have you do a lot of other things apart from your business, like going to all these chapters and meeting new people? Do you have any other side projects going on?
Yeah, as such, there's no there's one side project. I mean, it's not a side project, but we are doing expansion of our own organization. We are moving into a new facility, which is going to be constructed this year. So I'm kind of working on that project.
It's still on track, like with the whole COVID situation.
No, so we were supposed to start in March, but I mean, this was something which is totally unexpected. So I don't know what's the next. I really don't know what's the next timeline on this project now.
One thing I've seen a lot, like from you as well, is you have always remained fit. So I think that's also one of your side projects for me. Like, because it's like, I think you still go work out every week, or like at least try to go work out twice a week or something like that. So like, that's very impressive. Like, all for so many years, you have been consistent with that, right?
Yeah, so I'll be very honest. I was very, very active with working out in my college days, and suddenly when I joined office or I joined my business, it's like my physical activities took a backseat. I started working out less and less, and that kind of the lethargy kind of got into me. The credit goes to my wife Nidhi. Like, she's extremely obsessed with working out, and now because of her, since like last 2 years, I'm again consistently working out. Because when you are join any kind of business, and when you're too engrossed with your business, things happen like your families, your workout schedule try to like kind of take a back seat. So that is also one of the things that where entrepreneurs need to take care of, is you need a good work-life balance, and that was something which I was struggling with in the initial years of my of me joining my business.
Are you planning to build a gym in your new facility?
Well, to what kind of extracurricular activities to have? This is one option I've given to my employees, honestly. Like if they want a gym, they want a ping pong table, or I don't know what do they want, what gives them, like what makes them feel at home. Like I want to
Right.
make the new facility which makes them feel comfortable, because they end up spending more time in my office than in their home.
Okay, makes sense. Yeah, that I think that's what Google and Facebook also they try to do. Like they try to make their employees feel at home, so their productivity increases with that as well.
Yeah, I mean, Google and Facebook is still a distant comparison, but in my own little way, I still want to go on that path where you kind of give the best to your employees, so that they can give their optimum performance. If their mind is at ease, then definitely, I mean, your company goals will be met.
Totally.
Yep.
I think, Janam, one more thing that long back you were telling me about, and something that I am also trying to adopt is more of like a journaling or journal keeping about like, when you mentioned about work-life balance, the one thing that I was also struggling, and we had this discussion, and then you told me that you have like a to-do list and the whole journal idea that you've bought into picture, which has helped you cope up with how you distribute your time. So, like, would you want to expand on that? And is that like one of the habits that you would recommend people to definitely take on to make sure they have smooth sailing into their businesses?
So, Hiloni, when remember when you were saying that you were struggling with, like, you had a lot of to-dos to do every day, and you didn't know what to do about it. So this
Yeah.
is the same problem even I had. Like I had too many tasks, and I felt that my tasks were never ending. And that time I realized that, I mean, I cannot function this way where I have, like, too much of load is piled up on me. So that's the time when I started this journal keeping, where I split my targets or my goals into three categories, which I call them as yearly goals, monthly goals, and my daily goals. And I don't try to do every activity, or I don't try to achieve everything in one day. I split them into days, weeks, months, and year. And I journal every day, like simple meetings, uh, simple to-do tasks. Then like how many, I keep a track of what all I've achieved in every day, and I always get to see what I've done in my past and get to improve that in my present. So for this, there's an amazing app also that I use. It's called Evernote. I think if uh, some of you guys or some of the people in the audience want to really start bookkeeping, they can start using this app called Evernote. It's one brilliant and fabulous app, fabulous note keeping app.
Definitely, and I actually used to use Google Keep, and then 2 days back I actually switched to Evernote as well.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, it was just 2 days back, and like all my notes were in Google Keep, but I don't do like journaling there. Like I have a physical journal because I find writing down things it's more therapeutic to me. But like most of my quotes and lessons from notes and goals, everything they are like in Evernote now. But going back to journaling, like Jenna, when do you journal? Like, is it something you do every morning or night, or is it like
So that's what I do both. Evernote is something where I just keep my notes and to-dos, but I keep my goals in my journal where I physically write. Because what happens is when you write your goal, you tend to always go back and see what your goals are, and you get to compare from where you were and where you're today.
right?
Generally, my time to journal is in the night. Like, I mean, before going to bed, I like to plan my next day. That's the time I use to. It takes about 5 to 10 minutes to plan out the next day, and I mean that's the best time that I think is to journal, because once I enter my office the next morning, I already know what I have to do.
Definitely. Yeah, for me, it helped me with anxiety a lot. Like, if I had my plan for the next day, like I write 3 bullets, like things that I have to achieve for the next day to be successful. That's what I write in my journal. So, like, if I have those things written down, like I feel less anxious when going to sleep. And then next day, if I read that I've achieved these 3 things, then like I'm already successful for the day. So it gives you a sense of accomplishment. That's how I journal at least.
How often do you go back to see that I set this particular goal to be achieved by this date? and how am I doing with that? How often do you refer back to your notes and goals?
So I do it like my notes and goals. I see it monthly and yearly basis. Monthly basis, like in my organization, also in terms of business, we have something known as a monthly review meet, where like my employees are given goals to achieve in that month, and those goals are aligned with my goals, and my goals are aligned with my company's goals. So indirectly, everyone's aligned to the company's goals. That I do once a month, and once a year I also set goals not only for work, but I also set goals for my personal life. Like this year I have set a goal to read 12 books, one book a month. I kind of set those kind of goals also, like work half an hour every day is also kind of part of my goal. I mean, work out half an hour a day.
That's pretty neat. So did you use any template for Evernote, or you created one yourself?
No, so I use Evernote templates. They're pretty good in their way. Maybe a little modification here and there, but those templates are good enough. And for goal setting, as I mentioned, that I use physical journals because I like to kind of recollect on a piece of paper of what I'm planning to achieve. So all these kind of goals are written on my book. I call that the self-help diary.
Nice.
Yep.
Newton said, "If I have seen the future, it is by standing on shoulders of the giants." We bring to you these giants in the life of our guests. Our next segment is Top 3, a curated list of top 3 recommendations from our guests.
Which are the top 3 book recommendations by you, Jainam?
Yeah, so there's this book called Flirting with Stocks. It's by Anil Lamba. Yeah, I mean, nothing like, it's just telling everyone on basics of stocks and how to read balance sheets and how to read between the lines when you want to invest somewhere. That's one interesting book there. Then there's this book called Negotiation Genius. I think this is again a must read for everybody. Doesn't matter who you are, because in your life every day you have to negotiate about something or the other. So it's a very good book that I kind of heard in Audible. Yeah, so that one. And I also like to read a lot about space, and science has always been something which I've been kind of curious and interested in. So there's this book called Cosmos by Brian Greene. That's one amazing book if you want to know about what goes around in the universe. These are the 3 books that I think people can read about.
Okay. And then 3 movies or TV shows that you would recommend.
I mean, this is kind of very this is cliche, but Game of Thrones tops that list.
Even after season 8.
Even after the last episode.
I'm just giving you my recommendation, keeping the last season aside.
Okay.
So Game of Thrones is right there. Suits, something I really liked to watch.
Yeah.
And Big Bang Theory was something I really liked, the whole satirical, witty kind of drama TV series. That's why I used to really like Big Bang Theory.
Then I wanted to ask, like, given if you have enough revenue in your company, like, would you like start a business exploring space, like a separate entity similar to SpaceX? Like, I feel you're really interested into like Cosmos and all those recommendations. They tie very well into it.
Oh, definitely. I feel that. But only problem with space is that any business that does space, they don't generally have revenue earning models. Like, because till date, the technologies haven't been developed where people can earn good money in space. And that's the reason why not a lot of money or investments have gone into that sector. But if there was something on that line, I would definitely put my money on.
Yeah, unless you have technology to mine asteroids, that is your business model.
In I don't know, in something 1970 or something, this Neil Armstrong and his crew went to moon, and it took 30 years after for the next space flight to moon. The only reason was economics. It doesn't support the economics.
Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah,
till
even the moon, all the Apollo missions happened because of the Cold War.
but eventually both the countries realized that they were just guzzling money into something which was not giving them any returns.
Yeah, but that's the issue with capitalism, right? Like even with vaccines, I don't think so. People like companies will be able to put in money unless they see a profit coming out of it. So unless there is a profit on the other side, it's very
No,
difficult.
I don't blame capitalism for this. I think it's common demand and supply, or you call the common principle of business, where if something is required, then it is created. If something is not required, it's not going to be created. And that requirement is dependent on economics. Like the whole world works on the same principle. Why something is like example, vaccines would be developed now, people would take interest because this COVID-19 has suddenly changed the whole way people look at vaccines in pharmaceutical companies.
Google Maps wouldn't exist if we didn't have Apollo mission, right? Because all the GPS satellites went during those 1960s and 70s period. But people didn't ask for those, for Google Maps, basically. They were fine reading the paper maps. So sometimes you have to burn some cash, and hopefully there will be some application, some business model that will come out of it later after like a decade or so.
There's an Atit, on that note, actually there's an interesting story by Henry Ford.
Yeah.
You know what he says? He says that if I would have asked like when people were riding a horse, if I would have asked people what they want, they would have probably told me they want a faster horse. I
Right.
wanted to give them something which they never thought they would need. That's why I built a car.
Also, I think there's
That's-
a great book by Neil deGrasse Tyson, Accessory to War, which talks about all of this, how economics and space are related.
Oh, that's interesting. I've not heard about it. So what, like it's a show by him, or is he
No,
written
it's a
some book on that?
It's a book called Accessory to War.
Oh, interesting. I mean, and that would be a good read.
Yep, add it to the list. I just added it to my list as well.
Yeah, I'm gonna add that to my list.
You would want to tell us about top 3 investments of yours that you have made so far.
So actually, funnily, stocks is one area where it really helped me, because as an engineer, I came from a tech field, and finance was something which is on the weaker side. And like any firm foundation of any business is lying in the whole detail is in finance. So when I was doing stocks, that I started doing stocks, by the way, in my third year of engineering. I was doing stocks with my engineering, so that I wanted to learn how this whole stock market works. And in that process, I ended up learning how each company maintains its balance sheets, its data, how they do, what is a good company, what is a bad company, what is a company worth investing, and all that. So that I think was a great investment of my time when I started doing stocks in my engineering itself, because that knowledge would have been difficult to gain today, I feel.
Interesting. We should talk offline about stocks. I've been eating up books about stocks and reading about investments for last like 2 years. Would definitely want to learn what's your key
Oh,
take.
that's, I mean, honestly, that's right now one of the hot topics even that I'm reading a lot on. Because that book, Flirting with Stocks, I just finished last month, and it is already in my recommendation list.
So do you do like a fundamental investment or technical analysis?
Yeah, actually, I do both. It depends upon the market situation. Like in today's market, a technical investment I wouldn't recommend so much. I would still go with the fundamentals of a company, because what's happening is people are losing faith in the system right now, and not all companies are going to survive this COVID-19. So I want to go only with a company that have good, strong fundamentals.
Right. Any key metric that you look at for determining that has a good fundamental?
I look at something called as max pain value,
Okay.
and those normal company indicators, like there's something called as a quick ratio and
Right.
asset turnover ratio and debt ratio. So I look at those company ratios to see fundamentally how good a company is, whether they can repay their debts, uh, how less their debts are, how profitable the company is. I see some of the financial leverages also,
Right.
because if basically my litmus test is to check whether the company can survive a downfall. If
Right.
it can survive a downfall, it's definitely going to do great when the market is booming. But if it can't survive when the market is down, then that's a company that you wouldn't want to put your money in.
Unlike the name, we are dwelling deep into our guests' thought process. Rapid Fire is our next segment where our guests will answer some quirky, some weird, but mostly fun questions.
Starting off, the first question is, so what is your favorite purchase that you have made below $100 or INR 5,000 rupees?
What I've purchased below 5,000 is this this what do you call that? Alexa, yeah, the Amazon speaker. I mean, that's been one phenomenal thing in my life right now, because that one purchase has really like my room experience very different, because I can immediately talk to Alexa and get whatever I want, whichever song I want to play, change my mood in the day.
Do you have Alexa in every room?
No.
No?
My family is not so fond about Alexa. They kind of still haven't accepted that that technology, like things can talk, but that's why it's only yet been in my room.
Yeah, I have Google in my room, and then I've kept one in the living room just for my mom, and she keeps yelling every morning, "Hey Google, hey Google," which is super weird. It never works, but she keeps yelling at the speaker. It's very weird.
Oh God, I had the similar experience. I taught grandparents how to use it, and oh my God, they play bhajan at 7 in the morning on Alexa. It's just turned against me.
See, that's why I didn't commit that mistake. I just kept it in my room. I didn't want to introduce this to anybody in the house till this technology becomes safe.
If you could wake up with a new quality or ability, what would it be?
I would like to wake up with. Actually, I would like to wake up early. That's one ability that I want to
I think Nidhi will
inculcate.
train you in that.
Yeah, she has been that strongest support in those aspects where, because she's an idealist. I mean, she follows her day to the dot, and that's one quality which I'm trying to get from her anyway. So let's hope that I achieve that this year.
Okay. If you could be a CEO of one of the major companies, which one would it be, and what would be the first thing that you would implement?
Like Tesla would be one company whose CEO I would love to be, because that represents that company kind of represents a lot in the way I do and I think, because I kind of vouch for innovation these days, and especially SpaceX projects and their cars and everything is something which I'd be interested in. One thing I would like to change in their model is that they have come up with technology which is fabulous, no doubt, but they still haven't got a technology which can penetrate into every country and every continent. So the simple example is that Tesla car wouldn't work in India, right?
Yeah.
And even if it did work in India, the price tag on that is such that it's still beyond the reach of a lot of developing countries. So that's one thing I would like to change, where making technology which is not only eco-friendly, but making technology which is even accessible by everybody in the society.
Makes sense. Yeah. Okay. No, I was just thinking like how do you even go about implementing like the Tesla model with superchargers and things like that in India? like with the whole road condition, and the infrastructure is not set up for.
I mean, honestly, for me, that would be the litmus test of Tesla's car, because if it works here, it works anywhere in the world.
Right. But like the automated, like what do you call the auto driving mode, right? Like that would be really difficult in India.
Yeah, no doubt. I'm not saying that they could implement completely, but yes, that even in India, any event that happens on the road, it's something called a response to a stimuli, right? The car responds to anything that happens on the road.
Yep.
So, considering all the variables that exist in India, they have to take into account all of that and build a car. And because right now they are building a car which is too ideal meant for only the good conditions. They haven't still made a car which is meant for every and any condition. And once they start increasing their database of all the possibilities that can happen on a road, I think a car is possible to build even for India. I mean, I don't say that India's infrastructure is the best. I mean, definitely there's a long way to go in terms of infrastructure. But I yet believe that technology, like what Mr. Narendra Modi is saying, that make in India, I am just taking it a step forward. I'm saying make for India, because there is a way you can achieve even in the worst conditions. But problem is that such companies don't exist in India, and they are still developing for the first world. But there's nobody developing for countries like ours. We need companies that come up to develop solutions for problems for India.
If you had $1 billion, so like what would be a problem that you would like to tackle?
Definitely top on my list is environmental change.
Right.
Because like if $1 billion is there, and I would like to first take out oil away from the world, like because I mean, if you see that major problems in the last 100 years have been because of industrialization.
Right.
People are facing health issues, and like environment is deteriorating, and I feel at current pace, maybe 100 years down the line, basic things like water and clean air wouldn't be accessible to everybody.
Right.
So that's one global problem that I'd like to tackle if I had that kind of money.
Yeah. And this, like, yesterday we had a call with Prerak as well, and he talked about Joe Rogan. So yesterday I actually started listening to Joe Rogan's podcast, and the first one I heard was of Elon Musk. And there he was saying, like, we on the planet are experimenting by drilling more oil and then releasing the same oil in the atmosphere, right? So he was like, that's a very dangerous game to play, and we will regret doing it. So like that was something that was very interesting, and it ties back to what you have said.
Our next segment is called Not the Onion, presenting 4 news articles that are mind-blowingly ridiculous that they could have been written by The Onion, a satirical news company. However, one is a fake article created by us. You have to guess which one is not The Onion.
First one is a citizen solo runs a marathon in the shape of Boston Strog, STROG. So what happened is a US citizen took months of meticulous training, and she plotted out her whole training route in Boston to inspire people during the whole coronavirus instance, and like during the whole coronavirus pandemic. But what happened was, after she ran the whole marathon alone, obviously, and that she realized like she had made a spelling mistake. So it read Boston Strog, STROG, and not Boston Strong. So that's the first news article. The second one is a town in Kerala has started locking its coronavirus violators in a haunted house. So, fed up with people breaking virus quarantine rules, one politician in Kerala's Alathur village has decided to scare rule breakers by locking them in a haunted house. The politician has instructed communities to like repurpose their old houses, which are rumored to be haunted, and they have started locking up violators in those houses at night. Then the third one is there is a coronavirus romantic twist with a Delhi couple. A couple was detected in Delhi with coronavirus, but the girl allegedly had affair with three other men, which they found out when they were doing contact tracing, right? And that the three other men which she had affairs with, out of them, one other man had affair with two other girls. So right now, the Delhi police is trying to tackle and trace all of those men and women, and trying to see who has coronavirus or not. And then finally, fire officials in US have started urging people not to put face masks in microwave oven. So what people are doing is they are putting their face masks in microwaves to sanitize them. So what is happening is a lot of fire alarms are going in the US because a lot of face masks which are made of cloth have started catching fire, and that is adding to the load of essential workers. So these were the 4 news articles. So Jainam, which one is the fake one?
That's a tough one. I think the Kerala one is the fake one.
Kerala one. Okay. Atit.
Yeah, I'll also go with the Kerala one.
Kerala. Hiloni.
Just to be diverse here, I would probably go with the last one, the microwave one.
Microwave one. Okay. Yeah, the Kerala one is the answer. But just to add to that, this is not true for Kerala, but they're actually doing this in Indonesia. So I got the news article from Indonesia, but that is happening in Indonesia. Yeah, they have started opening haunted houses, like not opening, but they are finding haunted houses and locking up people in Indonesia in those houses in a village.
Damn.
Okay. But the funniest one was the Delhi couple one. I think I did not explain it properly, but it was like a whole movie, like a whole plot.
Yeah, like, I mean, I thought for a second that this could be fake, but then, I mean, I don't know, somehow I felt that people can be that ridiculous also.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Jainam. This was a lot of fun and great insights coming from you. And it was a pleasure to have you on the show. What we are going to be doing is we're going to be linking your company profile and your LinkedIn profile, and people who have more questions for you can connect with you and get more understanding. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
So that's about it, folks. We will be back next week with another guest and another story. We would love to hear your thoughts about the episode. Feel free to reach out to us on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook. You can just search What the Hat Podcast. Also, subscribe to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Castbox, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast from, so you never miss out on the next episode. This is Hiloni, Atit, and Tapan signing off, and this was What the Hat.